Our guest today is a two-time U.S. national champion in long distance running, and he is also a coach for young athletes who inspire to become an elite runner competing at a highest level. He's also somebody that has competed using fat for fuel. Definitely excited about that. He also has a series on YouTube called Monk Mode. I'm so excited for this. I'm
There's
here with
not much to that. Don't
Anthony
hype up that.
Connell. Oh no, it's definitely a show, man. I enjoyed that one. But welcome to the show, Anthony.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Man, what an incredible journey you're on, man. Um, I've really been looking forward to this chat. You know, when you messaged me, um, it was such a amazing feeling because it always fascinated me. Looking at athletes from afar and that reach the highest level, and actually, you've actually won multiple times, and you're still so young, having achieved a lot of things that you wanted to achieve. Um, I'm just so honored, man, that you reached out and speak to my listeners here. Let's talk
Yeah,
about your journey,
yeah.
right? A runner's journey specifically. Um, I'm no athlete, but I've watched a friend of mine, go through. He's a junior in college right now, playing for Butler University, and I've seen how he worked. Right, I seen
hmm
the training, the after school hours, the weekends. Not being able to spend time much with friends. The attitude, the mindset you have to have, and the love you have to have for the sport. And even if you already have all of that, it takes a mature person to understand all of that at such a young age.
hmm
um we'll get to your lifestyle and eating in a second, but I believe it starts with cultivating the right mindset. I believe with anything that we do, no better person to ask than an elite runner here, an elite athlete. You had accomplished so many things in your very young career. This journey, we pick up a lot of things along the way. um and with your journey, there's a lot of layers to talk about. First of all, you're an elite runner who uses fat for fuel, right? Who happens to live a monastic life. We'll get to in a second. I'm not an expert in that subject, but apart from reading Jay Shetty's Think Like a Monk, shout out Jay Shetty. Where did your passion from running come from? Did all of that, came natural to you? Has anyone in your family or friend that inspired that from you? Just want to understand how you harness that. When did you realize that you and then when did you realize that you can compete at a high level?
I think I'm still kind of realizing that I can compete at the
Mm,
highest level. I mean, I feel like I realized that this week. I'm kind of slowly accepting that I can Olympic trials qualify for the marathon. But
love that.
I I started somewhere middle of the way through high school.
Mm,
I just realized how much we know and how much we don't know about runners and running and what's possible. And I got exposed to Roger Bannister, who was the first person to break 4 in the mile. And just this kind of like cold calculating, he looked at his own data and thought for himself and said, this is totally possible. I can do this. And everybody, said, well, it's impossible. Or if anybody could do it, maybe somebody can. It's not
mm,
you. And the idea that your heart would explode or something magical would happen if you did this. And I really resonated with the idea that he just kind of saw the writing on the wall
mm,
and said, this is totally possible and this is possible for me, and just took that and ran with it, literally. And from there, I got intrigued by kind of running at large. And then that slowly trickled into anatomy and physiology and human performance and everything beyond there. And ultimately, that's what I went to school for. And that's what I love to do. And it was about halfway through high school where I realized I I didn't really know what it was going to look like. Like, it's not really a job, but it's like I wanted to live and breathe and talk and train and be around people that run and that push this kind of endurance. Like, how long can you last and how long can you sustain something, and what all goes into that, and how much of your humanity can you integrate into that. And So I kind of just dove pretty as wholeheartedly as I could, selling shoes in outdoor stores, or selling gym memberships, or whatever I could do to be involved in fitness and all of that. And that's kind of been, my journey up to this point. And it's always tinkering, right? Like nothing's ever perfect. And that's been a huge driving factor for me, is that crossing that nothing's ever going to be perfect with, okay, the writing's on the wall. What do I think is possible? And how do I make sure that happens? But then not just make sure that happens, but make sure that happens now, or on race day, or, in the right city that the race is going to be held in. And all these different factors. And, people like to say, well, sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't on race day, but I'm convinced if you're willing to control enough of your life, then you should be able to do it. If you're professional, what other profession can you just kind of sometimes not have it? You can only lose people so much money, or yourself so much money in business, before you have to say, well, maybe I made some poor decisions, or maybe I need to control more factors. And so that kind of gets into the monastic end of things, of like, how repetitive can I live my life, and what would that do to a human being? And then how do I give that to people? Everybody doesn't need to run 120 miles a week with workouts and lifting and saunas and everything. Hopefully I can just do it and figure out what needs to be figured out, and just kind of package that and give that to people.
What, you talked about, having that love for running, to start, when you were in high school. What did your teenage years like? What are those like for you? Were you somebody that had training after school, or what does that life look like for you before, and that gave you that edge? Because you're still very young. I'm not an expert at ultra marathon and whatnot, but I was looking at the average age of winners, which were like at the um, end of their years in their 40s actually. But you were able to win at an early age. I just want to understand how.
Yeah.
You said you started in high school. What was that like for you, starting at such an early age?
Well, so I ran through high school, like cross country and track, but my coaching was horrible. Just it, like, shameful. Looking back at it now, it was so much more than just a poor coach, or a job they couldn't fill. It was no mentorship at all. And so that was kind of a cyclical driving factor then for me, to then learn more and read more and become more and share more, because then it kind of raises everybody around me. If we're not having coaching, if I would have had an amazing high school program, I wouldn't have been driven to learn all the stuff that I learned about running and physiology and all this, and I would be a drastically different person. But because my high school program was so weak, I had really no desire to run in college. And so when I graduated high school, I had just this loose acquaintance that was like, oh, I'm running a 50K, it's going to be in a bunch of snow. It's probably going to be miserable. I'm like, I didn't know anything about trail running. I never really run in the snow much. And I get there and I'm in way over my head. And it was great. And it was like, well, I caught the bug. I mean, immediately, 18, ran a 50K in 6 inches of snow and road shoes. And the catching of the bug of that for me was, this went so catastrophically wrong, but how do I make it go better next time? And then from there, it's just been infinite. I mean, that from that one little seed of an idea has sprouted this whole existence that I've been living, of, even if it goes well, how do I make it go better next time? It's never perfect. And so that's what I was coming up with in high school. And it was a huge formative thing for me, that I felt the need to be independent with my coaching and my thinking and all of this. And, obviously, like, I started playing around with high fat, low carb in like 2010, 2011. And so that was a pretty bohemian move to be willing to give up the carbs, or at least admit they're not the be all end all, a decade ago. And so that was, you can see how that kind of like, came to be though throughout that. So
what does your peers think of a low fat, high fat, low carb lifestyle? What do those your peers? Because I believe that what I've been hearing is you can't use fat for performance. So what do they think of that lifestyle today?
oh, times have changed.
Mm,
I mean, 5 years ago, you'd have to explain to somebody what a ketone was, or
mm,
you'd have to really, really
mm,
accept sounding like a crazy person
mm,
to say that you're going to give up carbs. And even now, there's people that are holdouts, but it's pretty middle of the road at this
mm,
point. Like it's pretty accepted in ultra endurance that you can fat adapt and that you can go extremely, extremely low carb and perform very well. I think some of the magic tools that we have access though are making it more appealing to people, because you have exogenous ketones,
mm,
and you have like dual fuel idea of like, maybe you fat adapt, maybe you don't, but then maybe you add ketone esters like ketone aid, which is actually what I'm sipping on just for recovery right now.
mm,
But you add in these esters for recovery, or to blunt the glycogen, or the glucose rather, the glucose spike when you take in simple sugars.
mm,
And there's just so many more modern tools now. So now this idea of fat adaptation as kind of a spectrum, so
mm,
fueling for the demands of the day. So if it's a long, hard, murderous session, 6 hours in the saddle on the bike, or a 3 hour long run with serious pace work in there, you might have carbs beforehand, you might have carbs during, you might have carbs after, you might two of those three, or all three of those, but then the next day you might be at 30 grams for the day,
mm.
and it's becoming a much more talked about thing. And I'm not sure how cutting edge we really are in the ultra endurance world, but I feel like we're up there. We're pushing the boundaries here.
Let's talk about, you talked about fueling fat for fuel, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about your evolution with nutrition here. When it comes to nutrition, you have that passion for running already, but obviously nutrition is very important in the sport. Do you did you have a nutrition coach in the beginning, or were you doing it yourself? How did you learn about nutrition? Talk me through that stage in your life where you started, competing, and you have to learn about it. Talk about your relationship with food early on. You can talk as
Yeah.
early in your life as you want. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, through my teenage years, I was in you basically, you take the total calories,
Mm,
and you take the fat calories, and you want it to be like 10%. I mean, really the lower the better, like low fat, high carb, and just crushing carbs, and like skim milk, and no nut butters, and like just
mm,
crazy extreme stuff. And it's hard to tease apart what's just being an erratic teenager, and what is actual mood disturbances due to your diet and your lifestyle. And I went to high school in Chicago, and it's like you don't see the sun for 6 months, and it's like now I go 3 days without seeing the sun, and I'm ready to book a flight somewhere. Like I can't handle that anymore. And so it's kind of hard to tease apart all these different factors, but I do believe that it was having a negative effect on my mood, that I was doing low fat.
mm,
And by the time that I was 18, I was going to school for nutritional counseling, and I had Zach Gingrich in my life, who he won the Badwater 135 right after I met him,
mm,
which is typically considered the hardest event that humans do in a given year. I mean, it's ridiculous. And he was big on like at least high fat, if not low carb, at least high fat. So kind of like a zone approach, if you will. And then one of my people through vocational school for nutritional counseling, one of my instructors there was like, man, you endurance athletes are idiots.
mm.
And like my contrarian mind, I was like, tell me more, tell me more. And so it's like these factors were things he was big on. You can lift heavy, and
Mm,
you can eat fat, and you can restrict
mm,
carbs, and you probably just thrive hormonally. And
mm.
again, this is like 2010s. This is way before any resources existed that were on my radar, at least.
So
And
there's no more stigma. Are you telling me there's no more stigma on keto anymore with athletes this day
I don't
today?
I think at least in little pockets,
Mm,
it's destigmatized. I think
mm,
you're seeing like Team Sky with the Tour de France, like,
mm,
and you're also seeing less polarization, which is
mm,
gotta be a good sign. Like
mm,
that's gotta be where enlightenment exists, right? Is in this, like, I want flexibility. I want metabolic flexibility.
mm,
And so
mm,
if I want that, I have to have periods where I'm very, very low carb.
mm,
Otherwise, I can't burn a lot of body fat. If I want flexibility, I can't just go high carb all the time and expect that sometimes I'll burn a lot of carb and sometimes I'll burn a lot of fat. I
mm,
have to fat adapt. So in order to buy myself flexibility, and so I don't think that's dogmatic, right? That's looking for flexibility. That's looking for options. That's keeping my world open instead of closing it off. I think a similar thing with like footwear. You can always add cushion. You can't take cushion away. If your feet hurt, you can add cushion. If your low back hurts, you can't take away cushion unless your feet are already used to minimal shoes. I think it's a similar thing with all kinds of things where
mm,
you want to ask the right questions, right? You want to look at what your benchmark is for each one of these things, and then which way you need to push the needle to gain the most flexibility out of yourself, whether that be mechanically or mentally or spiritually or fat metabolism
mm,
wise. And so I think we're living in the era right now where they're not viewing it as a fat versus carbs thing. They
mm,
are We are willing, at least in little
mm,
tiny corners of the athletic world, are willing to say, well, I'm going to eat 40 grams a day
mm,
of net carb for 6 weeks because I'm putting in base. I don't need
mm.
carbs today. And
Yeah.
then, before a race or before a long effort, I might smash 300 grams worth of like simple carbohydrate before putting in a
Mm,
40-mile day. But then I won't fuel during the 40-mile day. I'll have a liter of water and that's it.
mm,
And so it's the having the flexibility to kind of incorporate all these things is a boon to my mind. It's really cool to see all these things coming together because I think it is about flexibility. And I do think most people would be better served saying, well, my hormones will rage and I got to refeed today, than saying, man, I'm such a piece of crap because I had bread with dinner,
yeah.
one night a
Yeah.
week. It's like the world is so broad, and you want to make sure, I think I want to make sure that I'm keeping it as broad and as open to myself as possible, which I suppose is kind of ironic since,
Mm,
I mean,
yeah.
I live in a freaking box, like right now I'm up at 7:15. I go outside, the sun's up at 7:25, 7:30,
Mm,
and I'm out there in the cold, in my towel, in my little skivvies to witness the sun come up. And then I'll lay in the snow for a few minutes, sunlight, morning light in my face, and I come in 45 minute sauna session. That's after having a liter of water. I'll have
mm,
another liter of water, and then I'll roll out. I'll do any kind of like activation or anything, and then I'll go out and run my first run. Next thing you know, it's it's time to hop on this podcast today. I mean,
mm,
noon was tight. I got home at like 11:55. That's why I'm sipping whey protein and some ketone esters still. It's like this is my recovery right now, and it'll be my first meal will be at
mm,
1, and then
mm,
that meal is exactly the same. I have sardine supreme, and
mm.
I'll have a kefir shake, some ferments, and it's like my life is exactly regimented right now. But
Man,
it's the irony is that is what freedom looks like to me. That is what metabolic flexibility and freedom over my own effort and my ability to travel through time and space
mm.
truly is bound in that. And that's just, it's not even a cost to me.
You know what? That's why I love having you on, because you are a model of discipline, right? I get it how keto or high fat isn't dogmatic in your community, because you have that discipline already. You have you're shooting for metabolic flexibility, right? In other communities, like in my community, right, a lot of people struggle, including me, struggling with self-doubt,
Mhm.
self-sabotage, right, limiting beliefs. Just making the right decisions every day is a struggle, right? For you as an athlete, you already have that discipline. That's why I wanted to go back to your upbringing, your childhood, because you have this built uh, good habits, and you're always in the right mindset to be able to go back and forth, have that metabolic flexibility. Because for some people, keto in my community is seen as a weight loss tool, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for some people, it's hard for them to go back into where their lifestyle before, because um, they could dig themselves a hole and not get
Mm-hmm.
back out. Um, Man, I want to talk to you about discipline, how you've harnessed that, and all that, because you also talked about living this monastic life, um, and, and and having that mindfulness. As an athlete, I know you're practicing mindfulness. How important is mindfulness in long distance running for you?
I mean, the way that I do it, it's absolutely everything. I mean,
Mm,
the to know, to see like this training block, like I
mm,
described my morning routine. When it's the same every morning, you kind of hit this peak aversiveness, right? Like cold exposure, right? Cold exposure is really trendy. If you expose yourself to a cold shower every day for 10 days or 15 days, your body won't respond like it did on day one,
mm,
but your brain very well might. Your brain very well might say, still, even though
yeah.
your body doesn't.
Mm,
And teasing those two apart, the body's initial knee-jerk response from what you want to pay attention to, or the joy of moving, or the rush of cold water, or the purity of sweating in a sauna. It takes a lot of mindfulness to enjoy these things.
mm,
And I would think that as the years go by, more and more and more of my life can go into that same category of, if you're willing to kind of take the good with the bad, there's
mm,
just so much good to be enjoyed.
mm,
And it takes mindfulness is like the currency. I mean, mindfulness
mm,
is the cost to do business with this,
mm,
because nothing is purely good and nothing is purely bad. And it's so hard not to, you talk about dogma again. It's so hard not to chase things that are like purely good, but that your 100th bite of chocolate cake isn't as good as your first bite. That's just how it works. That's just the human condition. And when you're constantly, chasing the dragon here, it gets you nowhere. And it's the Buddhist definition of suffering, right? It's looking
mm,
for permanence in something that's inherently empty and inherently impermanent. And that mindfulness with anything, with like I've been laying in the snow in the morning, and I hit a point where I knew how rough it was at the beginning. You get started and it's easy, because when you're started, it's new and exciting, and it's a push and it's a
mm,
rush, and it's the satisfaction of getting it done. But after 20 days or 30 days of doing it, there's no satisfaction out of getting it
mm,
done anymore. You're like, this is what I do. But you also
mm,
haven't hit the point where there's this like bliss that's
mm,
associated with, once you really, really fully lean into the experience, and you're not averse at all to what it
mm,
is, you can really find a lot of joy in just about anything.
mm,
And I think running to me is just one more thing to chase. It's not, it's less and less as time goes by who I am, and more a tool. And that's been a big shift for me, that it really isn't my identity. It's
mm,
it's it's something that I use. It's not even something that I do. It's something that I use. And I do think it's pretty much the greatest way to be a human is to run. I mean, it's what we're good at, right? And so when you operate this machinery like you're supposed to, right, like you have for 3 million years of human evolution, when you operate things the way they're meant to be operated, the 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 benefit, the reward inside yourself is health and wellness and longevity, and it's all the pleasant brain chemicals, and that's true, whether that be fat adaptation, or like long fasting, or socialization, or sex, or good food, or taking a run. It's like, these are things that have been evolutionarily selected for literally countless times, thousands and thousands and thousands of times. And so when you do these things, you're reconnecting to yourself. You're doing what you ought to be doing on an evolutionary standpoint. It's an interesting thing that I tease over in my head, and mull over regularly of, you look at a cheetah and you're like, that is meant to sprint, like that animal, you can just look at it. And it's like, you look at a bird and you're like, that's meant to fly. And you look at a human, it's like, what are we supposed to do? Like, what are we here to do? No wonder we have an identity crisis. And so I'm kind of averse to bring it back to the idea of discipline here. I'm kind of averse to the idea of discipline or grit or any of this. I think what I have is clarity. And I'm open to the idea that it's delusion. Like I can never prove that, maybe God's talking to me, or maybe evolution is talking to me, or maybe I'm a crazy person talking to myself. And I don't know that it really makes a difference. I don't think it does. What I have is certainty in an uncertain world. And I'm positive that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. The stuff that I'm doing is what I need to be doing. And all the negativity associated with that is just, it's just part and parcel with that. It's not really that it's important or unimportant. It's just it is what it is, right? You take the clouds with the rain.
Man, you have this great awareness to your everyday lifestyle, man. Wow, thank you for that. That's so beautiful. I want to talk. I always ask this to everyone that's reached that high level of consistency. How do you manage, or do you even get those days where you don't want to do this? You don't want to do something that you've subscribed yourself to do. Do you ever get those days that you didn't want to get up? Or, I mean,
yeah, every day at 7:15 when my alarm goes off. So
how do you manage those days?
I hate the cold. I do not like the cold. I will sweat. If it was like a would you rather, instead of having light goosebumps that actually kind of feels good, I would rather be sweating constantly for the rest of my life than have the softest, than just have my hands be a little cold. I hate the cold. So for me to get up first thing in the morning and have something scientifically backed, to boost mitochondrial health and brain chemistry like dopamine, and to have something that I really believe works and that I've seen works. And again, it's clarity, right? It's not that I'm so disciplined, or like, it's not that I want to be uncomfortable or am less uncomfortable with it. I'm just crystal clear about the fact that this is benefiting me. And what I want it's faith, right? It's an act of faith. What I want is larger than what I'm doing right now. And it makes my discomfort truly not matter. And there is something to, we talk about like, oh, you can make a habit and whatever, take a number out of a hat, 12 days or 15 days or 21 days or 60 days or whatever it is. That doesn't ever mean it's going to be easy. And if it was easy, you might not gain benefit from it. And so to see this, I'm trying to avoid sounding super cliche, but it's like to see the path as the process as the point. There's so much peace associated with it. And I was sitting in a coffee shop with a extremely wise old hippie here in Durango, Colorado recently. And I was like, well, I just don't know, I just don't know what the truth is here. She's like, well, the truth is peaceful. That's how in the truth, there's peace. And it took me aback. I've probably heard that before, but for some reason it clicked this time. And it's like, I think that's how that there's this feeling of rightness that is more important to me. And I think to all of us, once we kind of recalibrate ourselves and rewild ourselves, there's a feeling of rightness that is more important than physical comfort. And that's what all of this comes back to. That's what all of this is about. And I don't, like, to bring it to food, it's so easy to give in to some craving for some food, but it brings you no happiness at all. Like it's so fleeting. Even, and I'm really good about not holding stuff. I don't ruminate on things. And, most people in my life are really type A. That's why they're successful. I'm grateful that, if anything, like, I'm type B with type A tendencies or type A tools. Most people in my life, to get to the places where I am and live the life that I live and keep up with all this craziness, they're extremely type A people, and they will ruminate and hold things against them. They will pay that debt 10 times over again for some little thing that they did wrong. I'll let it go. But even with that ability to let it go, the cost, the stepping away from my goal, the losing the alignment with myself or with my highest self, is so much bigger than just some satisfying.
Were you always like that, Anthony?
No, I think I was a kid that could save money. So it's like there's some evidence. There's some evidence that I could pass the marshmallow test if you're familiar. It's like if you tell me here's a marshmallow, I'm gonna come back in 5 minutes and give you another one. It's like I'll get 2 marshmallows every time, right? Like I've been like that since I was a kid.
That.
I could delay some gratification, but I have become like I went through The Molecule of More. If you haven't read it, you should. Excellent book. Dopamine versus serotonin, and I realized I used to be a very dopaminergic person. I was a very abstract, it's what's in the future, it's what's ahead, it's what's outside of me. It's the next place to travel to or go to and arrive and movement. And I am much more of a serotonergic person now, where I am much more like, I have a few friends that'll give me crap for saying stuff like this, but it's like, man, it feels so good to be in my skin. It's like that first blast of sunlight in spring that just bathes your skin. I can walk around with that sensation for hours every single day of just like that first slipping into a hot tub where you kind of get goosebumps. I mean, I am so fit and so healthy, and the food that I'm eating and the sunshine that I'm getting and the engaging with my dogs and my friends, socializing and it's like it's all such a rich, deep experience that it's kind of pulled me out of this futuristic focused stuff. And it is kind of you become what you're good at, but a lot of it has been it's hard to tease apart what was intent and what was given to me, but it has been very directional, especially over the last few years of the running demands mindfulness. The next time I run real long will be the 100K national champs in April, and I've won them before. I'd like to win it again, but I can't possibly think about 62 miles. There's no way mentally to break that apart. I can say, okay, well, if I'm moving fast, it'll be 6 hours and change. So, it'll take me an hour to get into it. And then like, it'll take me an hour to get the fueling going. And then I only have to deal with, 4 hours. It's like, you just can't, there's no way to break that down to where it's acceptable. And when you take on things that are that big, like I'm going to do 6 months of something, it's either crushing or it brings you immediately into the now. And if you can't come into the is it Eckhart Tolle, the infinite now? If you can't come into the infinite now, you're crushed. You are inherently, you've stacked the cards against you. You're playing the wrong game. And so you either have to step away, which is why, in ultra running, there's this culture of like, you don't quit races no matter what. Because of what I just said, you can tell I'm totally okay quitting a race. If I'm in over my head and all I'm going to cultivate is suffering, I'm going to quit. I'm going to drop out of a race. I'm going to take my bib off and be grateful that it's not actually life or death out there. And I'm going to live to fight another day. And there's just so much joy to be had in running free and running, that brings it into the low carb stuff. If I can eat 100 calories an hour and feel great, then I don't have to worry about calories. I don't have to choke down food and be nauseous and all this stuff. I can purely just run and be free. Like run, 6-year-olds run, 5-year-olds run, 10-year-olds run. You tell them you can't run on a pool deck. What do they want to do? They all want to run. It's just such an inherent thing. And where would we be if we never lost touch with that? And so I am obsessed with maintaining that and cultivating that and furthering that, right? If anything, I should be able to do that better than I could when I was a kid. Not just strive to return back to pure kid joy. I'm an adult now. I have a fully formed brain. I have all these fun toys, I have ketone esters. It's like I have so much more at my disposal that I didn't have when I was 10. So why can't I find more joy? I think people would be very well served by adopting that attitude, at least occasionally.
Man, that's the goal right there. And man, people, I've seen people who've reached the highest level in one but didn't follow through after. But you, it seemed like you're chasing something else. You're not chasing to become a champion. You're not chasing someone else. You're not chasing an accolade. Man, it looks like you're chasing. It looks like you're chasing for that feeling. It looks like you're chasing for that clarity, right?
That's what I think.
Mm,
I could be deluding myself, but
mm,
that that is what I think I'm doing at this point in my life. Is I want to know, even when I put a time to it, or I put a goal to it, or I put a win to it, or some event to it, I'm chasing the sensation. And
mm,
I have reverse engineered the sensation based on, a decade of running logs, or more than a decade of running logs. And I know what this pace feels like for this long, or what this kind
mm,
of energy feels like, or what crushing this amount of like vertical up and down in the
mm,
mountains feels like. And what this kind of altitude
mm,
feels like, just pumping my lungs and
mm,
opening everything up. And I'm chasing that, and
mm,
everything else is reverse engineered from that. It's the shoes and the food and the nutrition and the how you carry it, and
mm,
the waist belts or the clothing or any of that. Those are all just toys. I mean, those are all just tools that I'm using to chase this experience. And the
mm,
experience is ultimately what matters in the end of the day. I mean, no one cares if you run fast, right? In the end of the day, I won't even care. If it was the difference between being happy and being fast, I would rather be happy. Like,
mm,
who the hell would even consider the alternative to that? But
mm,
I think a lot of athletes do. I think a lot of
mm,
athletes are of the mindset, and the sponsorship game and the competitive world that we live in
mm.
kind of encourages all this, and really promulgates all of this.
The first
And
time, sorry, go
yeah.
ahead, Anthony.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and I think that makes it a lot worse
Mm,
with competitors who are already kind of like wound tight, and they want to win, and then suddenly winning is everything, and it's just not that's just not appropriate. That's not
mm.
how humans work.
The first time you've won, was there something different about you? Um, the If you could take us back, is there anything, because you've won the next year too, right? 100K. Uh, was there anything different about you when the first time you've won? Different with
Like a
your,
national championship.
yeah, the national championship.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm,
There was, it's not like it was peace,
mm,
but there was validation to winning. Like, I won the 50-mile national champs in fall, and the following spring I won the 100K national champs. And the reason I was targeting those events was to get a Team USA slot to go to Croatia in 2018 to compete at the 100-kilometer world champs under the International Olympic Committee. When I won the 50-mile national champs, there were a few things. Imposter syndrome is constant. You know,
mm. Tell me
I
about that.
won. I won because I got lucky. He won because he's smart, or because he's talented, or because he worked hard. When we win, when we do something, we discredit it. We
Mm,
act like, and I don't know if that's everyone the world over, or if that's every elite athlete that I've ever met, or where that line in the sand is, but it is rampant. It's ubiquitous. This imposter syndrome. And so when I won the 50-mile national champs, there was a bit of, well, there were people that could have come out and beat me, or there were people that should have beat me that fell apart, or it was hot. It was like,
mm,
the event was hot. It had like 5,500 feet of gain, so a mile of gain and a mile of loss, and it wasn't at altitude, but it was hot, and it was gravel, and it was just 50 miles of road. And it's hard to make an event that favors me better than all those things. And so it was kind of easy to write it off.
mm,
But then all of 6 months later, whenever it was, 7 months later, we had the 100K national champs, and we had me as the current 50-mile national champion. We had another guy as the current 50K national champion, and another guy as the previous year's 100K national champion. So the three of us at the start line is like, all right, I'm going to run a fast time here. I'm not going to win, but I'm
mm,
going to run a fast time here, and it's going to be great. And there's a few things that changed me forever that came out of this event, which is, I did end up winning. And so it's like, all right, you can only get so lucky so many times. Like, maybe I was lucky, but the harder you work, the luckier you get. That's for damn sure.
mm,
Right. And so so it was harder to write off as a fluke. You know, if two flukes, it's a little harder to write off. And now I'm at the point where I can accept that, you know, I am talented enough to compete with anybody. If I have the day, you know, they might have 2 or 3 times the talent that I have, but I have my system so figured out. I mean, my gut health, my sleep, my supplement protocol, my diet is like, I am competing with all these different tools. You know, we're on the same board on race day, but they have like, they're on checkers pieces and I'm on chess pieces. You know, it's like I can do all this elaborate stuff with my stuff, which means it's a lot easier for it to go wrong because I'm dealing with all these different variables. Whereas if you just have a Pop-Tart and a cup of coffee and go crush races on pure talent, you know, there's only one moving part, and that's, do you have it or do you not have it? When you're reverse engineering everything, it can be kind of a double-edged sword where stuff might work, stuff might not. But I have all these toys at my disposal, and yeah, I mean, I'm kind of losing myself in all this. But the other thing that came back with this 100K national champs was I got a Team USA slot, you know, automatic entry for Team USA. So that's International Olympic Committee. That's as big as it gets. It's pretty hard to write that off at that point. And then I had this experience where it was somewhere around 20K in. So, you know, not even 20 miles into this race. And I see that these two guys are still trading off the lead. Like, they're still racing each other. And I'm in third place, like 2-3 minutes back. I was just going to run even splits, take care of myself, run my own race. And it was shortly after that I totally just disappeared into myself. I mean, I had been doing some candle meditation. I go to the Dharma Center 2-3 times a week when, you know, pre-COVID at least. And I'd have 45-minute meditations. I'd have occasional 3-hour meditations where you're sitting and then you're walking and then you're sitting and then you're walking. And so I had put in the groundwork. You know, I'd played with some psychedelics, which definitely helps put in the groundwork. And I'd done long sauna sessions where my red mill, which is an infrared sauna in the back and a drop cloth over the top. So you're in this windowless box just running at 100K pace, right? Like, I had put in all these disparate aspects to create this kind of flow state. But on race day, I can't possibly oversell that I had zero internal dialogue for almost 5 hours. I mean, I did not have a single thought in any language for a solid 4.5 hours. And that kind of transcendental experience changes the way you view yourself and the way you view your sport and the way you view the toys you're playing with.
That's the only time that happened to you, Anthony? That's the only
for
time
that long.
For that
long, yeah. I mean, that's some serious flow state. I mean, most athletes couldn't ever hope to aspire to 4.5 hours of selfless flow state because games aren't that long. You know, I mean, you could flow for an entire soccer game, even through timeouts and halftime and stuff, and it's still, you know, an hour, right? Like, you can't possibly hope to touch that level of like just pure time and space and just sliding through it with no perception of self or effort even. And so that kind of experience really does change the way, because it changes what you think the supreme goal is. It changes the way that you're viewing it. So then every step below that, it doesn't just make all my other runs meh in comparison. It really does make all the other runs more valid than ever, because that is even on the table now that people say you don't know what you don't know, right? If you've never experienced it, then how would you know? If you've never experienced the clarity of day 3 of a fast, then day 2 is going to suck. And it's like, I think that gets right back to previous questions of how do you find the discipline to keep going at something? It feeds itself. It really does feed itself, but it takes a lot of suspending your crazy, fun, modern, human brain that can do all these tools, that can do all these tricks. You got to kind of let that go. You got to kind of just disappear into the process and trust whatever you want to trust, your intuition or God, with or without a capital G, whatever you need to lean on. But something big has the potential to happen, and the more you can lean into that, it makes all these little details just peanuts, makes them disappear. And so that changed the way that I view my sport drastically, to know that that I'm capable of that sort of thing.
Have you delved into how to cultivate that again in a race? Have you looked into the research, the science of all of that?
Oh,
Get into
100%.
that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I've read every book by Csikszentmihalyi, which is the guy that wrote Flow, which is
Mm.
the book, the Bible on mindful states. We were passing around Stealing Fire, which was a particularly good book, a kind of a modern take on flow, and all the different ways that people experience flow, from
Mm.
dance music to church
Mm.
to psychedelics to
Mm.
Burning Man to
Mm.
like extreme sports, and putting this all together into one context is
Mm.
kind of a beautiful thing. And it's led me to believe that that's the point.
Mm.
um, I'm slowly realizing that I'm someone that likes to try on ideas, right? You got to put the whole costume on to know if I can pull off Peter Pan, which like clearly I can pull off Peter Pan, but it's like you got to put on the whole costume, right? You got to get full gladiator costume to find out if you can pull it off. You can't just like put on, one glove or a hat and think, this is silly.
Mm.
You got to really embody it. And I
Mm.
got to do the same thing with ideas. If I can't really, really buy into this idea that some crazy homeless dude is shouting on the street corner, if I can't really identify with what he's thinking, then I don't know anything about him. I don't know anything about this idea. If I can't really try it on fully, then I can't get in there. And I'm starting to realize that I genuinely believe, when I visit the idea that life is about something at all, that human lives, that we ought to do anything at all, that, philosophically we have an obligation to X, Y, and Z. I really do think that chasing these transcendental experiences, these experiences where we're selfless, and where we lose track of language and time and all of these things, I kind of think this is our highest purpose. And that chasing these things is not ethereal. It's not frivolous. It,
Mm.
it is quite possibly the point. And with that in mind, it can be anything. I mean,
Mm.
you can get this flow state through conversation, or through cooking, or through a good meal, or certainly with stronger things
Mm.
like children, or raising a dog, like
Mm.
interacting with a domesticated animal, right? Or all the big things, sex and food, and anything that makes you hot or cold, or anything. So there's I'm kind of getting to this point in my life, and I'll turn 30 in April, and I'm ready to be wrong, but I think this is what life is about. And
Oh.
that feels incredibly bold to assert that life is about anything, but these magical things, these transcendental experiences, I don't think we had a choice to 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 access these. I think it's the only way you could have survived in the past. I think it's the only way you could have connected with your other humans and your domesticated animals, and the animals you're chasing, and the food, and the plants, and everything you needed for survival. I think you were absolutely required to enter these flow states, and now we've disconnected from that. And I think that's
Man.
obviously, when you have a hammer, everything's a nail, right? but
Yeah.
but I think that's a major reason that we're so lost in the modern world. We
Mm.
just don't know what we're here to do. We just don't.
Mm.
you know you look at a hammer and you know what it's for. You look at a
Mm.
I mentioned a cheetah. You look at a dolphin, you know what it's for. It's like,
Yeah.
you look at the human brain, and we just don't know what we're supposed to do with this thing. Like,
Mm.
what am I supposed to
Yeah.
do with these silly feet and these hands and this,
Mm.
like this little patch of hair? It's like,
Mm.
what am I for? Who am I? It's no wonder
That
that we have these
that's the
existential
reason for
crises.
sadness, Anthony. That's the reason for sadness. They're not connecting to their higher purpose,
Hmm.
right? There's so much depression in the world today because they couldn't find themselves. They're not doing what they're supposed to do. They're at a job that they don't like,
Yeah.
right? That
Yeah.
that is the reason why. And for you to be talking about this and really dig into your experiences and how you got to this place that you are in right now. You developed this all throughout your journey. You picked up things, you picked up the tools that you have today that you can share it to other people. And that's why I'm so grateful to you and that you're able to share your story. I have a question for you. I know you talked about in high school having not having the greatest coaching. If you would talk to your younger self, if you would coach your younger self, how would you coach yourself? Where do you begin, and what would you tell them?
Oh man, that's a tough one.
Mm.
I have asserted that if I don't resent my youth, my younger athletes that I get to work with, if I don't resent them, then I'm not doing my job. Because I should look at them and be, man, you have it so easy. It took me 20 books and 4 years to figure out what I just told you, and I just gave it to you. I just spoon fed you that information. And unfortunately, that's not totally how information works. Hugely unfortunate. But I don't know that I could help myself. I don't know that there's anything I would be worried about changing anything at all. Genuinely. I don't know that if I would have had it any easier, I don't think I would have developed what I have now. And I think what I have now
Love it.
has, again, this feels like very bold to a
No, I
certain
love it. I
period,
love
but
it.
because it's
It
a
makes
very
sense.
overarching thing. But I think what I have now has value to people, and not just people in a generic, like, oh, people need to hear this, but like in a modern world, you go out onto the street and you see the person that doesn't know what they're here to do, and you say, hey man, maybe you don't need to know, what you're here to do in capital letters, but maybe if you can just connect to something that your body's really good at, and that your ancestors through countless eras, eons, literally have been selected to do, maybe you could just tap into some of that, and it would bring you some clarity or some happiness. And maybe that's enough. Maybe just connecting with that would be enough. I think I couldn't have come up, and maybe when I summarize it, it doesn't sound all that profound, but I couldn't have come up with the things that I'm playing with and that I'm toying with and that I'm slowly kind of solidifying as I slide into my 30s here. Hopefully I can figure something out and offer it to people. And I'm positive I would have never figured out what I have figured out if it would have been any easier at all on me. So I don't know that I could have saved myself anything.
Yeah, you wouldn't want it the other way. It's your life, it's your experiences. If maybe I should have asked you if you would go through that again, would you have gone through it? I think
it would suck.
Yes.
It would suck, man. when you talk about like if you could come back, or reincarnation, or you're reborn, man, if you're telling me I have to go through middle school again to get a whole nother human life, you can keep it, man. Like, no way. That is the crux of human existence, is being going through puberty.
This has been great, man. Can you start running at any age in your life?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah?
I think the writing's on the wall. People, totally. I think when you come at it with the idea that you're going to engage with yourself, with your most primal self, you're going to see, let's just check under the hood. You don't take a car and look. I mean, some people do. You don't take a car and look at it and say, it's a nice car, or not a nice car. You take it for a test drive. And it's like when you press down on that gas and you feel it hum. That's when you have to feel it, right? It's the same with your body. If the average person trying to couch to 5K came at it with that idea, instead of like, oh man, I'm out of shape, I gotta like force against force, right? This like kind of like masculine energy of like force against force and the mission, and I got stuff to do, and I got checklists to get rid of, and I gotta lose some weight, and I gotta get a 6-pack, and I gotta do all this stuff. If instead you looked at it more experientially and said, how do I engage with myself in a way that is appropriate for a human body and justifies the gift that I've been given with what I have? And it might not be perfect. You might have horrible flat feet and horrible sciatic pain and God knows what else, but you meet your body where it is, and you offer it what it needs. and you chase it from that. How do I operate this human machinery mentally, physically, spiritually at a level that's appropriate to what I've been given? And with that in mind, speed doesn't matter, age doesn't matter, none of these numbers matter. These don't even exist. In the now, these numbers don't mean anything. All it costs you is time and effort, and time and effort, you can't pin them down. Like they're relative to the point where they're not real at all. So it's like they're worth considering. They're factors to consider. We live in a physical world with physical limitations and cool tools like a stopwatch to measure things, but it's not real.
Wow, Anthony, that's so good, man. Thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate it. I could talk to you all day.
I appreciate it, man. I have a lot of time to think, so it's a good chance for me to respond to questions and see how I think about things and see what comes up for myself. And so I'm very appreciative to have the venue and to chat it up. But
damn, that's wisdom, my friend. That's wisdom right there.
I'm always down for talking about the X's and O's. I feel like we got a little crunchy today, but I'm totally down if we want to talk about optimizing caffeine consumption and ketone salts versus ketone esters, any of it, man. You just let me know.
Hey, man, there's part 2 for sure. Anthony, I really appreciate you. We're going on an hour now, and
plenty.
I love it, man. I hope everyone here listening is taking notes, and I'm definitely re-listening to this and make sure I didn't miss anything. Anthony, if there's anything that you want to say to our listeners here, it's your chance, and I'll give you the floor right now.
Oh man, I've had the floor for a while, so I won't bog it down too much. People can find me on Instagram, just at Anthony Kunkel. That's phonetic, Kunkel, and they can hunt me down on there and see the stuff that I endorse and how I make this life financially viable. I think that's always a valid question. And and just you can tell that I'm a total nerd, just academic through and through, trying to figure out what works. And I don't think it does anybody any good if I don't share that. And so my driving force for all of my social media is to share stuff that I think works. And so you won't find any endorsements on there that are phony. You won't find any thoughts that I'm not. I mean, I might not believe them, but I'm at least trying them on, right? And so you'll find a lot of rich content just through my Instagram. And then I do also have a Patreon. So my dream of athlete as artist, right? If every athlete is training and they're spending all this time on themselves, certainly they've had thoughts that are unique. Certainly they've had thoughts that the average person would never think otherwise, right? You have a unique experience, and if you don't share that with people, then they have to live without that wisdom, right? And so that's a big driving factor for me. So with that in mind, sponsors can shackle you, sponsors can censor you, they can keep you from talking about crazy transcendental experiences or mindful sexuality or psychedelic use or any of these number of things, right? Like it could sound bad if I refer to caffeine as a drug. Caffeine's a drug, but like Nike certainly doesn't want to hear me saying pop my drugs for the day when it's caffeine. So with that in mind, I've created this Patreon where I just kind of like talk about whatever's on my mind and written content. And there's a few chapters in there that'll ultimately be a book, probably at the end of this year, early next year. And just trying to do exactly what I said, exactly what I just said of trying to conflate all these ideas into something that people can get value out of. And so people can go on there and pay $5 a month or more, whatever's cozy for you, and support me, and then have access to ramblings that may or may not ever make it anywhere outside of just on my Patreon. And then it's this, I mean, how cool would it be if it was truly a crowd-funded athlete? That would be amazing. A couple hundred people, $5 to $15 a month. It's like, you could totally liberate an athlete to just be an athlete philosopher and artist and create and share their experience with the world. I mean, that would be pretty cool. So I'm not sure if it'll ever be me, but I'm putting out the business model so people can copy it and refine it.
Absolutely. I'm gonna put all your links down below, guys. You can check that out.
Yeah.
Man.
For people that are on Instagram, I should mention my place here, we're in a 1,300 square foot double wide trailer in Durango, Colorado at 6,800 feet altitude, surrounded by immaculate nature and alpine peaks and world-class running. And I call my place the Ultra House Durango. And anybody that wants a place to crash, come here, dive into whatever your craft is, whether that be sitting in the snow with me and that's all you do, or running or cycling or photography or anything. This is a space to come and create and, you know, use all of my stuff, use all my sponsor stuff, and see what works for you, and do all that at a zero cost way. And then I offer that all just sliding scale. I mean, I need a new storm door on the front, so it's like I won't turn down money, but that's about it. You know, that's the level of grandiosity here. So anybody that wants to,
That.
I have seven bunks in the front. We half jokingly call them the monk bunks, is where people come and go monk mode, disappear from society for a little while, and just crash in there. So I got room to sleep 7. I would love it to be full. So
that's a beautiful place to live, man. That's
Yep.
a beautiful place to live. I Googled it earlier.
Yep.
Wow.
Show up anytime, man. I'll host you for a week or a month or whatever you got.
Hey, I'll take you up for it.
Absolutely,
man. Anthony, thank you so much. I appreciate you, sir.
Dude, thanks for the venue, man.